Tennessee gets the news that it wanted, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this whole thing is over. What does this mean for right now after that Friday afternoon news dump?
Well, I think what you're looking at now, Eric, is you're looking at the NCAA trying to figure out how they want to proceed. Do they want this to go to trial? I mean, it probably doesn't fare real well for them if they go to trial. It's been loss after loss after loss. I've made that joke about them being the Washington Generals for a while, and that's what it feels like. As for Tennessee, I mean, I think you can kind of put your head on the pillow at night and not be too worried. I mean, could the notice of allegation still come, Hubs? Yeah, but I don't think most people think it will, because I think they're going to have a tough time winning that charge. And let's face it, if it ever comes, you're going to see another lawsuit, from Spire and likely from the university, something that we haven't seen to this point. And I think for both those parties, they would just assume everything just kind of fade into the background, because then they don't have to go spend a bunch of money on lawyers and have to go to discovery and all that at court.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a notice of allegations coming on the NIL stuff. Now, there's other things that would be included in the notice of allegations if Tennessee got one, involving some discussion. I mean, we know Tony Vitello was suspended from some games a year ago. I think some of that stuff is a part of the broad-based investigation beyond just the NIL stuff with Nico, which has been the focal point. We know Rod Clark was in a situation with the NCAA as well. That those things were self-reported. Those things were self-imposed in terms of infractions against them. The question is, does the NCAA say what Tennessee did in those cases enough? Because here's what happens when you self-impose something. You kind of look at the history and go, okay, what's in line with what they've done in the past, and you do it. Nobody at the NCAA ever says, okay, yeah, that's good. If you do that, we're good. It's a bit of a guessing game, if you will. So I guess in theory, the NCAA could come back and try to get that part of it if they wanted to try to punish Tennessee and go aggressively against Tennessee. But from an NIL standpoint, I don't see that there's any way that they're going to have any kind of leg to stand on with a notice of allegations there. So to your point, Austin is exactly right. It's the NCAA is back in Indianapolis trying to figure out what they want to do next. Do they want to pursue this thing and go to court, go to trial long term? Do they want to find some way to settle something with the state of Tennessee? The reality is this is a national rule. I mean, everybody's going to fall into this deal. Do they just go back to Indianapolis and say, you know what, let's move forward and try to find some parameters and try to work with some people instead of just asking Congress to help us out, which has been their answer to everything for the last 18 months?
Well, true. If you end up going to court and you have discovery and then it goes against you, then the injunction can be used against you in these other cases, like the case out in California and so on and so forth. But if we go to trial and you lose, then it becomes firm, right? Like this is an injunction right now, and so you run the risk of it biting. Everybody, coaches always love to use that. You can't let that team beat you twice. If you're the NCAA, you can't let this case beat you in other cases, and that's part that gets to if you get to court and it doesn't go your way, which most people know it won't.
So I guess my question is, and this is kind of an impossible ask maybe, but what's this timeline looking like for what's next? I mean, is this down the road, couple months? Is this, could this be prolonged, couple of years? I mean, what do we need to be looking forward to in terms of going to the trial? If this goes to trial, what the timeline looks like in that area?
Oh, I don't think that I wrote this and said this when this thing first came out, Rob. You look at this deal settle in. If it goes all the way through to the end, I mean, you've got discovery, you've got depositions, the case in California that Austin referenced is like 4 years old, and they still haven't come to a resolution there. So if this thing's going to trial, it's not going to go to trial this summer and come to some type of resolution at this point. I mean, if that's where the NCAA is going to go, I think it's going to take a while to get there.
Well, I was just going to speculate years, and I was also, and I don't know this. Just spitball it out there for discussion. Don't you think that the longer this goes, and with this result, the possibility that other states might also jump in with their own from interested parties or conferences? How does the Big Ten, SEC stuff affect the path, going forward, does that bleed over, into this, and maybe lead to some mitigation. But like AP said at the top, I mean, it's been loss after loss after loss, for the NCAA, and to me, more than anything, that's why I'll be surprised if anything major comes from this, and if it does, it'll be a long time.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the NCAA trying to get their pound of flesh that they didn't get from the Jeremy Pruitt deal went about this. They leaked it to Pat Forty. They leaked more to the New York Times. And that was their playbook, right? Then they got their lawyer in there, and he said, "Well, we're not sure. There's no evidence that we leaked anything. Blah 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 blah." But what I do know is they would love for the cloud to kind of hang over Tennessee, because then they can say, "Well, we never sent the notice of allegations, But like the whole threat of it and the cloud and the headlines out there could have an effect on a recruit or two or three, right? Like it's not going to have a recruit on most or an effect on most, but it could have an effect on 1, 2, or 3. I talked to a kid over the weekend who referenced, kind of the unknown out there, about Tennessee, because he had read headlines. And so that's something that, I don't think affects everybody, but I think it affects enough to where Josh Heupel, Danny White, Rick Barnes, Tony Vitello will have to, dot I's and cross T's when they're talking to prospects, about Tennessee, because I think that, kids aren't going to just openly bring that up, or at least most aren't. And I think you're going to have to be proactive about it.
Yeah, I think the other big picture beyond Tennessee from a recruiting standpoint, I think the other big picture for me here, guys, is there's been a lot of stuff written since Friday about death of the NCAA, right? Like this is such a major blow to the future of the NCAA. And Rob, I think you've been, you've made this very clear. You think that a breakaway is coming. I think all of us think that a breakaway is coming at some point. My question is, now that this ruling has happened, what is Greg Sankey and the Big Ten? What is their next move? Because it feels a little bit like the dog that caught the car, because now it's here. So like, how do you get yourself organized if that's the next step, right? If you're breaking away, instead of talking about it, you got to put a plan in place. And I don't know that college football at the Power 4, 5, 3, whatever we're down to now, has a plan in place, Rob. So how does Greg Sankey and the Big Ten go about, beyond just expansion of playoffs and who gets the money from the playoff? How do they go about planning a potential departure from the NCAA at that level?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's fascinating. I think that's a great analogy, the dog that caught the car. Because I mean, this, what they formed, announced this partnership, this coalition, less than 2 months ago, and then all of a sudden you have what may end up being, I don't know if landmark is probably too strong a word, but and what looks like another significant nail in the coffin, for the NCAA trying to put the genie back in the bottle with NIL and it's the famous phrase, established guardrails, long after the fact. So, I think it's, I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's given probably Sankey and the Big Ten probably even more of an opportunity to shape, what this thing is going to look like going forward, would be whether that's going to be in partnership with the NCAA or whether it's a straight up breakaway. But I think the way things are trending, I think you see the NCAA probably try to throw a Hail Mary at some point and try to walk it back and create some sort of a partnership to where they don't lose big time football in the college football playoff altogether. That's just speculation on my part, but I think it gave the Sankey Big Ten coalition even more of a winning hand than they had a month ago when this announcement was made.
If I'm them, I'm trying to make sure I don't lose basketball, because I mean,
they die
where they could, that's their moneymaker. They don't make jack off the football. They just kind of, it's a nice little feather in the hat, right? Like the basketball is what keeps them going. And so, like, you better figure out how a way not to alienate yourselves with everybody where you put basketball in jeopardy, because that's when they really do go belly up.
Well, and listen, I mean, I've said this. I think that's a reason why basketball's not been at the forefront of the national headlines about NIL. It's been football conversations. It's been football schools, because they do have to protect basketball. The other thing too is, I mean, what's going to happen with Title IX if you're talking about breaking away and all these other things? I mean, there's so many levels there for everybody just to say, "Hey, the NCAA is dead," you know. But what does that mean, right? Like there's so much stuff that you have to go through. There's still so many things there. My question too is this: I mean, where's Charlie Baker? Like, I mean, other than issuing, the NCAA issuing a blank statement. I mean, what are they doing? Like, is he having meetings with the SEC and the Big Ten? I mean, like at some point they have to do more than just say Congress help. I mean, Congress is not going to help. It to me. I mean, isn't that pretty clear at this point? I mean, they've got to come up with some forward thinking on something. It doesn't feel like the NCAA is really doing anything other than taking losses right now, Eric.
Well, Brent, right now Charlie Baker's making sure that you don't give cookies out, outside of the lobby. Okay, you're not decorating. Official visit hotel rooms right now. The optics, boy, he should run a seminar on just what looks good in the public image.
Well, and here's the problem. You're right. Here's the problem the NCAA has and has had for a long time, in my viewpoint. Everything, there's the NCAA, and then there's all these little pods to the NCAA, right? You got the enforcement committee, you got the investigation committee, you've got all these little different groups that meet, once a month or once every couple of months. Most of the time they don't meet in person, or they all fly in for, I mean, like Charlie Baker doesn't even work in Indianapolis. Like, that's not where he bases. I mean, he's in charge of the NCAA, but he doesn't come to the NCAA office. He's still in the Northeast. Like, it's all fractured and splintered. And so you got one group that says, hey, we can no longer do cookie cakes, because that's something that's on their radar screen, because they're not thinking about, hey, what does it look like if we don't have college wrestling championships, or we don't have the softball World Series, because basketball funds all of those sports, right? I mean, somebody has to take control and go, hey, let's put some of the small things y'all are worried about to the side right now, and let's go down the big path here. And the big path is we got real problems. And it doesn't feel like anybody's doing that to me. That's my soapbox.
And you're exactly right. I mean, it's so many of these different subcommittees that have things on their priorities. And Brent, Austin, you guys know better than me, but a couple of people that are, working in sports at the collegiate level, not just at Tennessee, that do decorating the hotel rooms and all that type of stuff. They're thrilled. A lot of the member institutions wanted this rule to be passed.
Like the pictures. It's like the photo shoots.
Yeah, I mean, because it takes work off their plate to where they're already overworked and they're already underpaid. So in the grand scheme of things, we're laughing about this. Like, that's not a bad deal, but it's just the optics, and no one's on the same page. Like you said, no one's meeting in person. No one's saying, okay, well, this is what we need to be focusing on right now. And this little tiny stuff really doesn't matter. As we kind of transition here, I do want to ask one more thing. Austin, I was doing a radio hit, and I was asked last week kind of what is changing in the day-to-day for Tennessee athletes, Tennessee football players. And I said nothing. The day-to-day is normal. I mean, kids read headlines, they hear all the noise and everything. But for Tennessee football players right now, you're working out, you're with a strength coach, you're doing classes, you're getting ready for spring practice, meeting with new position coaches. The day-to-day operation has not changed despite everything kind of going on right now, right?
No, it's business as usual. These kids aren't thinking about any of that stuff. They've been going to their normal morning winter workouts. They're getting ready for spring ball. Coaches are figuring out new ones, especially, or figuring out what they have in their room, kind of what path they want to take this spring. And so, no, it's business as usual for the football team as they get ready for spring here in just a couple of weeks. I will say, before we change subjects, the new rule just crushes me. I mean, Trey Johnson had a comprehensive plan on cookie sheet cakes. I mean, like, it was unbelievable. He had a personal deal with a local baker. I mean, like, it just.
Well, I mean, I hope the balloon industry can survive, and there's no rules against the balloon industry.
No, they still do a million of them on campus.
Now, but in terms of how it affects to your question, it doesn't affect the current players. What's going to be fascinating is to see what direction this thing goes in recruiting.
Yeah.
When kids come back to campus in March and it gets open, now that it's okay for meetings to happen and out in front, and you can go do whatever you want to do. Does that really change a whole lot from what everybody around the country's been doing? Some would say no. It's just you can do it out open in front of everybody and not behind closed doors or not kind of, in different ways. So, but for the current team, it doesn't change anything at all.
One more minor question that just kind of came to mind. And this is still, I guess, technically breaking the rules, but the Florida State OC, the assistant that got suspended a game because he drove a prospect to the collective, with what just happened with the injunction. I mean, I know I guess it's not retroactive or anything, but I mean, shouldn't that punishment be nullified now?
Well, listen, I think to the best of my knowledge, he kind of had a bit of a moment of a kind of a mental mess up, right?
Okay.
Now, do I think that he has a case? I don't mean there was more than just to drive the kid to the collective, but like the point is like, do I think he has a basis to stand on to get some of this stuff reduced? Yeah, I'd be doing something. Like, I mean, like he has got like a show cause and recruiting restrictions and all kinds of this stuff going on. I would get a lot of that, reduced. I would go after, trying to get it reduced if I was Florida State and if I were their OC.
All right, so never a dull moment. Tennessee, the Friday afternoon news dump. The state of Tennessee wins the preliminary injunction against the NCAA, and of course, we will see exactly what is to come from that.